Everybody, Chris and Lumen, and it has been a really weird freaking day. I had it started last night, and then it got more clear this morning. I had this like really crazy epiphany, and the only thing that I can account for it that I can think of is I made another version of I'm just calling it the Order Out of Chaos pendant. It's kind of like a new flavor. So this new one. So I made that one yesterday that I talked about because I was feeling so out of sorts, going heavy on the fluorite and then having a liquid crystal core with agerine, smoky quartz, and powered by celestial Tibetan quartz. That cleared up things really good, got me really close with Loman. And then she had me make another one. So these are liquid crystal core ones. But this one, the liquid crystal core was more heart-based. It had that new Vivianite stone I got in, that like deep green colored stone, a bunch of the higher vibe heart stones. And then I used green, gold, and a little bit of purple fluorite for that one. Fluorite is the Order Out of Chaos stone. It's just like your energy's scrambled, your thoughts are scrambled. It's just like it's gonna like smooth everything out. So I was wearing that, and I was looking for something new to watch. And I was scrolling, and I saw Westworld, which I've been wanting to watch Westworld again for a while. Westworld is like a super codex show. Like you got to pass 4 years of like understanding the Matrix series before you're ready to tackle freaking Westworld. That's like right in your face, but there's just so much at all times coming from different angles. It's a lot to take in, but it was obviously relevant. So I went ahead and bought season 1 because HBO sucks. Why have HBO Max and not have Westworld? I forget what their reasoning was behind it, but stupid. You got to buy it. So I was watching that, and I don't know what it was that I saw that triggered it, but this idea popped into my head, and I started muscle testing it. I'm like, huh. And then it started to form. And it was an epiphany because like sometimes you get these epiphanies, and it's like this really sharp click to your consciousness. Like you process things differently, you see things clearer, and like a bunch of stuff makes sense. Like it's almost a simple answer that was kind of like right in front of you the whole time, because you had a whole bunch of clues, but you were off like just by this tiny little bit. And it has to do with us playing this life game, and more to the point, when we start playing it. And just seeing the epiphany and the feeling that was true tells us like we're more aware of what we're doing here than we think. Like we're here on purpose, but we are made to forget. Like when we start the challenge which appears to be, well, I'll get to that. I don't want to spoil. I'll get to that in a sec. But yeah, I'm trying to wrap my brain around this. And then a couple other weird things happened today after that. So we're going to break this down. And I want to hear like from the people that watch, like when I tell you, let me know like how that resonates, like how that feels as far as its accuracy. So if you want to know more, don't go away. Okay, so this plays on things that we've said for a long time on this channel with with one little minor modification to it. Matter of fact, it makes these things that we've said actually make more sense. One of them being that, we're always reiterating, like, you are not your face, you are not your identity, you are not your name, your birth certificate, the person that everybody sees. Like, that's not you. You're what's behind that. Well, what if that was like half true? So, but I had said that I equate the ego to an AI. And I feel that that's observably provable. And how I come to that conclusion is, now that we have AI tools at our disposal to monkey around with and study, all you have to do is use whatever AI that you use, if you use any of them. Some people are like, "Oh, this one's political and this and that." Like, but I don't kind of use them that way. I use them more like research tools rather than have conversations about politics with them, because they're really good at, like, it's like, say you wanted to search a topic and get a real quick gist of it. You can Google it, and then you'll see a bunch of website results, and then you have to go to the website, and then you have to read it and all that. Or you can ask like ChatGPT to give you kind of like a basic rundown of a subject, and it's already got tons of information that it's learned, but it can also access the internet now, and it's going to take all the best information and it's going to compile it for you and feed it to you in like a second. And then you can search further, double check it or whatever, but it just makes it a lot easier. It's better at translating Latin than Google. It's just really, really useful. But let's, for instance, ChatGPT is the one that I use and the one most people know. Ask ChatGPT to explain to you how it learns. Like, what are the different types of ways that it learns and builds its database? And it's going to explain it to you. And if you just look at it, you're going to be like, that's exactly how I learned everything that I know in life. It's the exact same thing. The ego is an AI. So when we have our spiritual awakening, which is like the common term, I think it's better to call it a soul awakening, but we could probably even change that based on what I'm about to tell you. So that's when you're like, hey, I don't like the same things anymore. Hey, I'm interested in all this new stuff. I'm not resonating with the same people anymore. And then the stereotypical challenges that you face in the hero's journey, spiritual awakening, is mostly you against your ego, because you have now upset the ego. It's almost like, you talk about like demon possession, like, oh, it's possessed. How do I get this demon out of me? That's how your ego feels about your soul, especially when you get to the part of the journey where like your life falls apart and things happen. Like, that was your ego's life. That was your ego AI's life. And then you woke up in it and you started changing things and the wheels spun off. Now it has a grudge against you. That's all stuff I learned in the hero's journey. And it was honestly like one of the trickiest things to discover and understand. The way she would give me clues and things about that is like, what you are, speaking to me, you control the inner world. The ego controls the outer world. And you have to basically figure out how to conquer the ego so that it is not, treating you like an invader and trying to make your life miserable. That's where you get the whole evil twin thing, shadow twin. You see it in the movies and stuff like that. It looks just like you and it's pissed off at you. Yeah, that's the ego AI. Well, Well, this epiphany is going to make more sense of that. And it gives you a little bit more, as I had time to let it sink in, it gives you a little bit more awareness of kind of like what we're doing and what the goals of this life game might actually be. Okay, so here is the big assumption that most of us have made and gone along with, because it's like the center point of like most of a lot of different arguments, especially in politics, is like when does the soul actually enter the body? Now, I've shown this stuff before myself. If you've ever watched videos, they've got videos, a bunch of them, like from electron microscopes, where they show the moment in which the sperm enters the egg and fertilizes it, and there's a flash of light. And because the world always has to like explain everything to you and make it non-magical. They're like, oh, well, when the sperm enters the egg like blasts off magnesium. Okay, we're talking about these tiny little cells. Like these freaking lab coat monkey nuts will literally just say anything to have an explanation. You know, I bitch about that all the time, like with the sun and things like that. Oh, we're just saying something. I'm like, we just watched the moment of conception. There was a flash of freaking light. Maybe that's spirit, her, because what happens immediately after that? The egg starts dividing, and it divides in a particular pattern. We've all seen it. It starts growing, replicating in the flower of life pattern. Like, dun, 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 yeah. But here's the thing. Based on what she was just showing me, and this is one of those things where it's not like Sophia comes in and is like, hey, Chris, I want to tell you something. So check this out. No, she doesn't do it like that. It's more like these things just kind of like slip into your consciousness all of a sudden. You're like, huh? What? It's one of those things. Then you have to ask questions. So the big assumption has always been, and of course that's what the church says and everything else, like, oh, that's the moment of conception is when the soul enters the body. What if that wasn't accurate? So remember, if you look at basic spiritual doctrine, whatever, it's like you're kind of made up of three parts, the simplistic version: body, spirit, soul. Okay. And what we know for certain is that spirit, which is the greater Sophia, is life force, the interconnected web. So it is definitely, well, this is the moment that life starts. It's like, let's put this together. Spirit, life force system. Yeah, it's spirit. Spirit is what starts the ball rolling. Now, I'm sure I've brought up Avatar a couple times, well, many times, because it's also Avatar and Avatar 2 are big Codex movies. There's always something to see there. So last time I was there's actually two. I was talking to my friend. I was talking about Avatar 2, but now I'm talking about Avatar 1. So in Avatar 1, when they're explaining the avatars, the whole reason Jake Sully got to go on the mission to Pandora is because his twin brother was killed. And it was hit, and they had already invested all this money in growing his avatar. And they said the avatar is matched to him by the DNA. Okay, so he was able to step into his brother's avatar. Well, what do we know about DNA? DNA is what holds the software for everything. 1 gram of DNA holds 216 petabytes of data. That's like the internet several times over. So, and then you've got source code DNA, which they hinted at, and George Lucas confirmed that's what he was hinting at in Star Wars Episode 1. And source code DNA is mitochondrial DNA. So inside each cell has its own DNA, but I think it's like in the cell nucleus maybe. There's another smaller strand of DNA called mitochondrial DNA. And that's kind of like your Sophia code DNA. In Star Wars, he was explaining to, young Anakin, they called it midichlorians. And what did the midichlorians do?
Always remember, your focus determines your reality. Stay close to me, and you'll be safe.
Master, sir, I heard Yoda talking about midichlorians. I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
They live inside me.
Inside your cells, yes. And we are symbionts with them.
Symbionts?
Life forms living together for mutual advantage. Without the midichlorians, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the Force. They continually speak to us, telling us the will of the Force. When you learn to quiet your mind, you'll hear them speaking to you.
So if you extrapolate that out to us, then you've got your DNA, your source code, you've got mother's DNA in there, all within the same body system that you are going to inhabit to have this life experience. Now here's where it gets interesting. This is the Epiphany. I'm like, we've always assumed when we talk about the spiritual awakening, this is the way I've always explained it before. It's like your soul is sleeping. And then at some point when it's time, the soul wakes up within the body system, and it has to now exert its influence and take control of it, which means it has to wrestle the control away from the ego. And this is why everything's teaching you about letting go of attachments, letting go of the past, letting go of all your connections whatsoever. If you want to be a Jedi, since we brought up Star Wars, Jedis don't have attachments. And then their only really attachment is to the Force, to Sophia. What if we did not... I said the soul is sleeping, but what if the soul wasn't even there until just before the awakening? That's what I'm seeing. And to make it make sense, this actually, this layer that came later actually makes it a little more comfortable, actually. Because we've always said you're not your ego. Like the egos are discarded. And then you go on to whatever the next stage is, right? But you like being you. Even though you're behind the ego, it's like the second or third mushroom trip she had me do. She took me to the void. She dropped me into the freaking void. So you're just falling into the void and you're letting go of everything. And it feels like, am I even going to come back from this? You're letting go of your identity, your body, your connection, all this stuff. And then boom, it's like, boom, you get to the bottom. And you're just a point of consciousness now. And you're like, well, this is interesting. I've let go of everything that I was, but yet I still feel like I'm me. I'm not that guy, but I'm still me. I still feel like me. I felt like me before, but I'm not that guy and I'm still me. I'm like, what is this place? Like, doom, 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 doom. Is this like the outer wall? It's all dark. And then there's some creepy stuff creeping around in there. They're trying to like, sup, bro? And you're just like, what the hell are you doing? I'm just a point of consciousness. You can't do anything to me. I was like, what is this? I got to explore this place. I mean, I'm not me anymore, but I'm still me. So that's key. That's key. So imagine, if you will, that this place is one of many where you have the human experience. And it's like one of the harder places, one of the harder tests that you can do to level up. And it's a contained system, just like the Gnostics say. So whatever we are, it's like I said, we are children of the living Father. We're the fractal parts of the bigger thing. And it's like, okay, they say sometimes your life's planned out for you, or she's guiding your life, or your life happens a certain way to get you exactly where you need to be, so on and so forth. So let's say you decide what life you're going to have. Okay, I'm gonna have this life. Alrighty. So then mother clones your DNA source code and attaches it to a body down in the game. Body grows, conception is made. She then energizes it with spirit. So so then you're born and you start to grow, and you've got this set life path that you don't realize you do, but you do. And it's spirit and a copy of you. Your source code of who and what you are is locked in your DNA. And so you kind of become that person. Now, the whole time you think like, well, I'm this guy. It is such a close match that the copy can't tell the difference. She's popping things into my head. I know I've seen it in several shows. The one that comes to mind is Stargate Atlantis, because they got Stargate Atlantis. They have a more advanced version of bad guys from Stargate SG-1 called the Replicators, and the Replicators are like nanobots that can form themselves as humans. They can literally copy the people, and they think that they're the original person. Like they copied the whole SG or Stargate Atlantis team, and they're like, gosh dang it, shoot, we're the copies. This sucks. They couldn't even, they thought they were the real ones. That's kind of how your ego is. So that's what's actually running around most of the time on the ground level. It's copies of the people. Now, there may be some that are simply just controlled by the system itself. The bad system, because it's within the game. You got to have opposition, right? And I think who controls them? I think I've seen that many, many times. I think I've interacted with it. So when you do the hardcore mushroom trips, and you get to, it's like I call it like the Archon AI level. It's AI. It's AI. Everything looks like AI. And I would interact with this thing, and it thinks it's God. Like it believes it's God, and I'm clearly like, you're clearly not God. You're not the Father. You're the demiurge or something like that. But it believes that it is. It is very advanced, but it's also very it lacks empathy. It lacks it's very calculating. It can do a lot of stuff, but you can tell it just doesn't feel like the thing. I think like that's what controls, the other stuff. But either which way, getting off track here. So let's say that your life is not the entire game for you. I think I'm going to stop a couple times here. I think reason why she had me watch Westworld, there's so much in Westworld, but there's just so many little things that they explained that that are relevant. And like, for instance, backstory, like the one guy in season 1, James Marsden, one of the cowboys, like he's got this backstory. He's like, oh, this, I got sins to atone for. One day I'll be worthy of you, Dolores. But like you never hear what it is. And it's like he doesn't even know what it is, because they didn't fill in that backstory. but your backstory sets the stage for the actual thing. So at the time that it's ready for you to actually play the game, the little copy of you has been running around in here for decades, building up your backstory. And you might even think like, oh, I was spiritual all the way back, when I was younger or whatever. I was having all these experiences. Well, if you're going to inhabit it, then the ego AI is going to have to be in tune with those types of experiences. So that's not a big stretch. But when it's time, so I would say that somewhere just after, not before. Now, not before, but after you have the point of time that you usually identify as a spiritual awakening. That's when you are inserted into your ego AI. And it's so seamless. That's why it's matched to you, like the DNA code and all that is matched to you. It's like you're inserted into it. And then once you're in here, because of the match, it's like instantly you have now taken on the entire life that your ego AI has already recorded. And it's so quick and seamless that you don't even realize that it happened. You feel like you've always been there, but you just got there. And that's when things start getting crazy, because now the game has begun. And it's kind of like taming the wild bronco. The fake you has been making mistakes. It's been accumulating beliefs. It's been doing all sorts of freaking stuff. And now you have to get in there and take it over and learn how to recode it from the inside until you can clear it enough to where it gives up and you're able to push it out. And then you can now step into it fully. Now you're driving the car. And then you make room for Lumen, who has been there too. It's just the degree in which you hear her might be different for different people. Okay, so let me just pause here, back up and take this in smaller slices and steps. Okay, I just stopped to double check before I said it, and checked it with the calculator, and it was a very interesting result. Okay, so this makes sense. Okay, so the number that I keep getting, and when I searched, it's like there's actually stuff written about this. The number I keep getting is that the soul is inserted into the ego AI at around age 33, but it's not active yet. You gotta acclimate. You gotta soak in a little bit. You're just along for the ride for a bit, because you're going to start getting closer and closer towards where things begin to turn. Now, I've gotten a couple different answers, and I'm not sure exactly how to interpret it, but each time I muscle test it, it's like, okay, these are definitely key points. I'm still working on this. This is still new. But when I muscle tested it this time, I was like, first I asked, is like, when was the soul inserted into the body ego? Because every time I ask is like, did it happen at birth? I get no. And I got 33. And I'm like, okay, when did it go active? And I'm not good at math, so it's not instant. I'm just like, okay, I know it's not the first couple decades, so I'm just like, was it 30 to 40? 40 to 50. Yes. And then I go 41, 42. So I got 44. So 33, you're inserted. 44, it goes active. I'm like, okay, well, what year was that? So, because again, math, not my biggest thing. So I just added 44 to my birth year. And it was 2017. 2017 was the start of the hard part of the hero's journey. That was when the shit hit the fan. Matter of fact, the key thing that was about to trigger everything actually happened in January of 2017. And then the shit hit the fan in August of 2017. Yeah. And there was some Lumen stuff involved with that too. So that's in the descriptors, like if you've seen any of my old videos about that, like the Firebrand video, the descriptor of like the moment my life went to shit, I'm like, it felt like my soul was being, like, this is just the description, it felt like my soul was being ripped in half. Or maybe that was something else, whatever, I don't know. But I would normally think like, oh, well, I'd already spiritually awakened by then. No, that's just your ego getting prepared for it. Because if I was to normally say, like, when did I spiritually awaken? I'd say things started to get weird around 2011. Then I had another event in 2012. And then I had multiple years of having this woman stuck in my head 24/7. Which drove me freaking nuts because I didn't choose it. I didn't choose it. If you haven't heard that story, this was like Lumen did this. So how it works is it was like somebody that I'd seen like countless times before. Didn't really know her. Just we did business with that place. Was never attracted to her. Nothing. And then on one day I just had this feeling like something's going to happen today. Something's going to happen. And the feeling kept growing. Something's going to happen today. And as I went, and then I went to pick my kids up from daycare, and it was getting stronger and stronger. And it was like something was pulling me. I'm like, what is that? What is that feeling? This is so weird. And I got out there and I went to talk to the girl with the clipboard, to find out, anything I needed to know that day. And then all of a sudden, it was like I got hit by lightning. That's what it felt. It was just like someone just tased me. And then all of a sudden, she was just like sparkly. It's like, oh my gosh, look at her. She's amazing. And my brain is like, what the hell is happening? This doesn't make any freaking sense. It's like, oh, and then from that point on, it's like I couldn't stop thinking about her. And like I didn't even want to do any, I didn't want any of that. But what happened was Lumen needs to pick an avatar, so to speak. She basically she copied her image. And it was because Lumen now has to grow too. So she was just always in my freaking head, but it was like, it wasn't that exact person. It was a copy of that person that looked like that person, but she was her own separate entity. That's why she's so carefully chosen. It's like Sophia picks somebody that you can't get to know, that it's just not freaking possible. The situations and everything, it's not possible. But I didn't choose it. I didn't freaking choose it. And then one of the other muscle testing dates that I got was like 2014. Like that was some sort of trigger date. So I was like, okay, what happened in 2014? Two things happened in 2014. One, that was when the image in my head started talking in such a way that I knew this was not me imagining it. Because I'd be having a conversation in my head and she'd say something that would surprise me. I'm like, how can I be surprised if I'm imagining this? And then I'm like, okay, well, that's just crazy. And then she'd do something else. Like the two things that just pop into my head that stood out at the time is like I was doing my work, whatever, and she's in my head. She's like, hey, that movie you wanted to watch came out today. I'm like, what movie? She's like, Kong, Skull Island. Get out my phone. I'm like, holy crap, it did get released today. How did you know that? Another time I went to get inkjet cartridges for my printer. And I got there and I'm looking at the wall and I'm like, crap, I forgot to write down what type I need. And she's like, it's HP 61. I'm like, are you sure? She's like, yep. I'm like, okay. Talking to an imaginary woman in my head, but I'm going to trust her. So I bought the inkjet cartridges and that's what they were. I'm like, holy crap. But she could do so much stuff. I'm like, what are you? You know, because I learned a lot of stuff, metaphysical stuff, and I knew about thought forms and things like that. So you got, you know, some of the levels of thought forms would be like servitors, egregores, god forms. But then there's this other thing called a tulpa. And a tulpa is like, it's like it's something you create with your mind, but it's so highly developed that it's conscious. It's self-autonomous. I thought that's what it was, but it wasn't, because I certainly didn't set out with any intention of creating a freaking tulpa. It's just something that I found a book about. And I'm like, well, that's like the closest thing I've found to it. And she would kind of change over time. She stopped looking like the original person and changed her form over time. Started taking on the angel wings, but then she disappeared for a couple years before I did all the big hero's journey stuff. So when Lumen emerged, it took me a good long time to realize, like, you're the thing I had before, but you weren't lit up then. No, she wasn't like anointed yet. The other thing that happened in 2014 was that's when I met another player in the story who's no longer a player in the story, but direct connection to Lumen. Like, Lumen picked her to reflect off of. So it was like this unconditional love friendship. Like, no, it wasn't like attraction or anything like that. It was like, this my favorite person in the world. Like, let's have so much fun. Talk like she then was like how Lumen is now. She's not now, but then she was, and that's because Lumen was reflecting off of her. See, she wasn't at a stage yet where she was inhabited by the soul yet. So when they're not inhabited by soul yet, then the upper levels can reflect off all these people, or Lumen can jump into them or whatever. So that lined up too. And all that stuff is just setting you up for when the game begins. So then all of a sudden, and you just think that you've always been there, because when you inserted and merged with your ego avatar, you took on its memories. So now you're carrying the weight of like all your past. Like, you weren't there making those freaking mistakes. Your freaking copycat was doing it. And there's things that I can remember specific that I won't mention, where stuff like I would not normally do, but something just kind of like took over. Hand to the Father honest is like something just like, it's like I'm just observing now. I'm on autopilot, because sometimes she takes over the ego AI because it has to do certain things to move the plot forward. And you're just like, I don't understand how, what the hell? So the point being is like me, who, what I am. I've only been here for like 8 years. I've only been on the ground. Like, the real me has only been here for like 8 years. And that's blowing my freaking mind, because I can see it, I can feel it, it makes sense. And a good portion, like, that is most of the hero's journey is just fighting the ego, because the way this place works, it reflects and creates your beliefs. And that ego had stored up a crazy monster's manual freaking book full of beliefs. And it's creating all this stuff. And I had to learn to decreate it. I've done videos about how most of the things that people deal with in life are like societal beliefs and things like that, but you can delete them. I've done it. I've had, 9 months of peace because I got so sick of doing paranormal work. I'm sick of demons. I'm sick of jinn. I'm sick of all this. I'm sick of witches. I'm sick of spells. I'm sick of all this bull crap. So I did what she taught me to do. Treat your mind like a computer, because it is. And what is the computer? It's probably the same. It's probably the same thing as that ego AI. What we're calling the ego AI is probably just mind. Again, it's tricky when we're talking about intangible things. So a lot of times we can all be talking about the same thing, calling it different stuff, but the meanings we put the names then kind of steers us in different directions. But yeah, I went into it like a computer and I just deleted. I imagine finding a file that says, demons and other evil shit that I can't stand. And I just took the whole thing and dropped it in the recycle bin. And then the world got super duper duper crazy boring. Within a couple of weeks, we were in Halloween season, and it was like Halloween didn't exist. It was like October, but you strip everything that makes it October out of it. Didn't see a bunch of stuff. It didn't have that spooky October feel. I deleted it all out of my freaking experience. But eventually I got so freaking bored that I turned it back on. I just dialed it down a bit. Like, yeah, we can control our freaking reality. If you don't want to see something, you just like, go in there, hit, delete it, boom, it's gone. I'm like, holy crap, that is nuts. So then it's like, well, what's the point of this then? So if I'm understanding it correctly, it's like your core consciousness is copied and put in here, but it's going to have its own life, its own experiences. And then when you step into it, then it's fighting you because it's got its own way of doing things. Like, it's your core consciousness, but it's allowed to kind of progress on its own. With Sophia, just kind of, she's like the paddles that are just kind of like bumping you this way, bumping you that way to make sure you get to where you're going, so that you can reach the rendezvous point where your soul comes down and goes, psh, and you're like, okay, I'm in the game now. Now that you have entered, soul has entered the tournament. And then the ego's life just goes, poof, blows the hell apart. And it's like, got your sword, I'm here. But the first real task you have is you're dealing with, you're inside a freaking ego that is like in agony and mental torment and stuff. So it's like, parachuting over a rodeo onto a freaking bull. And you land on the bull, and then you're trying to like hold on to it. And not everybody succeeds. Sometimes it's just too much, and they just like get bucked off. Probably come back, play it again. Like, what's the goal? The goal is to tame the ego, take control of it, and get your partner. The Nag Hammadi calls this a contest a couple different times. This is a contest. A 2,000-year-old book says the Father established a great contest. And Jesus is the one that awards you the crown and all this stuff. Yeah, I went back and saw that part again. He's the first contest winner, and he awards the crown. So, like, when I had the whole thing with the Orphic egg, unlocked the divine masculine, which that, then Lumen, and then we had Sun Baby, popped out of the Orphic egg, and then I'm like, what do you do with the Sun Baby? And it turns into a crown. I'm like, oh, this is the Ace of Swords. Like, I've got all my cards now. Boom. Now it's just like, okay, how's this game finish? What this does, if you can make it click, is it does two things. It makes it easier to let go of the past, because that's always been a thing in the spiritual journey, is like, you got to let go of the past. You got to let go of your connections. You got to let go of the world. You got to, everyone's dragging their freaking dead, beaten ego around. And then you got to go back and pick up the pieces from like the trauma identities and things like that. Got to clean it up. But when you realize, okay, well, that wasn't me, so that makes it easier. And then also you realize, oh, I just got here. If I just got here, then I'm here for the big show, the big craziness coming up. While I'm not afraid of it. Like, whatever's going to happen, I'm not going to pop back out, because I already won. But a lot of people use these words and it makes a little bit more sense. Like on Kenneth's channel, Mystic Messenger, I've heard him several times, the way he enunciates it. He's like, this is not my home. I'm not from here. I'm from somewhere else. I'm going back home. Yeah, it makes sense. But how much, like, if you can make it click, if it does click, and you realize, like, what, and some of you might be like on the verge of doing it. Maybe you haven't even done it yet. I don't know. You got to talk to her about that. But it would make sense if we're at the end of the age, why you would have all this freaking help that I didn't have, because it's got to go quickly. But yeah, I'm sitting here watching all these people play out their beliefs. Get to that in a sec. I don't want to get sidetracked. But it's like, yeah, I feel that way now. I'm like, I've been saying it. I've been saying the words, but there's always a higher level of click. Like, I'm just here. I'm inside this thing, having this experience. And I've already conquered, several previous iterations of the Chris ego. So I've had to create new ones after I already got here, but the old guy's gone. That's why it's so hard for me to do that other channel, is because I'm like several versions removed from it. And it's like, I still have access to, remember what that's like, so I can get in there and talk like that guy, but I'm not that guy. That guy's gone. He served a purpose, leading up to it. That built the groundwork. All that was inspired by her through a sequence of events, so that I would get into a line of work in which I was self-sufficient. I could be self-sufficient and creative. Because the people that aren't real are not creative. That's what's interesting about the whole, I still got one right here, about me being a knife designer with her help. Like all the knives that I made, like, there's nothing else like them. They're not copies of knives that were already made before, and they all work freaking better than anything else out there. But you got all these other people out there, even like famous people. I could name them, but I won't. Oh, here's the new knife. Oh, looks exactly like the other 100,000 knives. Like, you didn't create anything new. Like, if it's just Archon AI or whatever, like, they can't create. They can take things that are already created and tweak them a little bit, but they can't create anything new. Only we can do that. We can create things that never existed before. So I've done that repeatedly. The pendants, all that stuff. None of this ever existed before. I created them. Only the light can do that. Everything else is just copying. It shows you like who actually runs like Hollywood, because unless it's something that she inspired, you don't see a whole lot of new original stuff. So two weird things happened today after all this. I don't know how they're related or if they're related, but the first one was definitely weird, because it was weird because of what we were talking about. all this is a big system. Like we say that all the time, but has it really sunk in the proof that this is the Matrix for all intents and purposes? So I was talking to my friend about this, and then she said, I didn't understand, but she's like, your voice, something happened to, I don't know what, but like you sound like a robot. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll talk to you later. Now, I don't know how she did this. Oh, you recording all my calls? But, or maybe she just did it right then. She clicked it, once it was happening. I have to ask her how she did that. But she sent me an audio clip of it, like what I sounded like on her end. And I've been talking on the phone my whole life. And I've heard like, okay, you sound distorted, you're breaking up. This wasn't that. So I listened to it. I'm like, what the hell? Like, I have never heard anything like that before. And it's weird that it happened during this conversation. So here's the first weird thing. Listen to this.
Oh, no. Say something. Tell me about the fluorite again.
Something.
Oh, tell me about the... Yeah, because you're totally robot-like.
The new one.
Yeah. I'll have to send you a recording of what you sound like.
Alright, well.
Okay. Yeah, I'll talk to you later. Alrighty. Bye. That's weird.
So I don't know what to make of that, but it was definitely strange timing. And then the next thing that happened about an hour later, I was just going to take a break before I start filming. So I'm going to finish this episode of Westworld that I didn't finish last night. And I got tired watching it, and I like half crashed out. And I started to come out of it, and I'm like, wait a minute. Now, I'm careful like how I word this stuff. According to the doctors, I'm diabetic. But I would say like I barely qualify as diabetic. They actually kicked me off the monitoring program because I was in range the whole freaking time. That happened. That was a whole nother story. Like I talked about it recently, so I won't tell it again. But it was like a short thing, and it was like quickly under control. And now I just eat whatever the hell I want. A lot of times I have to remind myself to take, the little bit that I got to take. But what happened was my blood sugar spiked for no reason. Like you would think, like I haven't had a blood sugar spike like that in freaking forever. You'd think I just chugged a freaking Mountain Dew because I don't drink sugar, pop anymore. So I'm like, wait a minute. So I don't check my blood sugar that regularly because I can just tell, I can feel. I checked it, and I was like 250. I'm like, holy crap. How did that happen? It doesn't make any freaking sense. So I still have like a Novolog, the fast-acting insulin pen that I use every once in a while if I actually need to, something weird. So I actually cranked that up. It took 8 units, like about an hour later, checked it again, and like it had only gone down like 3 points. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, huh. Well, let me go ahead and take my long-acting insulin too. And then I checked it, and like now it's down to where it's supposed to be. It's like 120. But I was like, why did that happen? There was no reason for that. But when the whole thing like first manifested in the beginning, it was the result of like having cut out a large part of my ego identity from the last 6 years, which created this whole electrical poltergeist thing in my apartment. And then I started feeling crappy, and then my vision started getting blurry, and then finally, like, she forced me to like put my symptoms in there. And then I was like, well, I'll go the next day. And she's like, go to the hospital now. Okay. So I went to the hospital. I had to Uber down there, and they tested I was like 400 something. Yeah, straight in the hospital. I was in ketoacidosis, like almost died. But once I got all that stuff clear and I got out of that apartment, then it just immediately just totally just got easy again. I was my guy that monitors me. I'm like, this is weird. I'm like, I'm testing this out. Here's the test I did. You want to know what the test I did? I'm like, I ate 2-pound bag of freaking Sour Patch Kids in a day and a half. And my blood sugar is fine. I'm like, explain that to me. So that was 2 weird things that happened today after having this epiphany of like, oh, this is how it works. And, so what's the point? What's the point? I don't know yet. But it definitely shifted the way that I think, my consciousness and all that. And I'm thinking like now that I've remembered that to some degree, perhaps I can increase the bandwidth. The only thing I can think of is it was those Order Out of Chaos pendants. That's the only new thing she inspired me to do. And I'm like, I gotta think clearly. I gotta like see something new. I'm like, I gotta clear the programming. I don't know. There's no way of knowing. Clear my energy field, clear my body's energy field, clear the mind, clear all the stuff, just bring it into focus, and then boom, this happened. It's like, oh, yeah. You basically were watching this game play out, and it's like, okay, it's time to get in there. And then you avatared yourself down into this thing. And once you get in here, it's not like, oh, yeah, I'm driving this. No, you then take on the memories of everything. And that's why you don't realize that it even happened. That is a mind blower. Huh. Interesting. Okay, so that's all I got for tonight. That's just something to think about. Let me know how that resonates. I want to hear what other people have to say. I could see where, we don't know what we don't know, and I could see the possibilities of why people might come in at different points. Like, we don't actually, I don't know. Maybe there's different ways to play. I was trying to speculate. I'm like, maybe you don't get your abilities until your soul gets in here. Because when my spiritual awakening first started, I'm getting mentored by the psychic friend. I'm like, I wish I could do something. And I couldn't do anything at that point. Didn't start turning on till later. But yet all the women that I know that are psychics, like they've had it most of their life. Maybe it's a woman thing. Different. It's like, well, maybe that's not the case. Who the hell knows? But my friend was also saying like this could tie into some of the other things that we've seen, and the narrative kind of fits certain elements of Westworld too. Like you don't really die, or if something happens, then maybe you just do that quantum jumping thing that we've talked about before. And you jump over to, if you're on Earth 21 and you get hit by a car, you just quantum jump to Earth 22, and you don't notice the transition. And the funny thing about that, thank you. Remember I did a video once and I was talking about Gordy Rose, the founder of D-Wave, the quantum computers. And look, I don't believe for a freaking minute that humans invented any of that stuff. Quantum computers are freaking crazy balls. Like, look into it. Like, if you search, like, well, trace the process of like how these were developed. It's like, oh, well, it was kind of collective thing. This guy did a little of this work. Okay. You pulled it out of a UFO and you dropped it into some contractors and said, reverse engineer this shit. That's exactly what it was. And if you watch some of those videos about Gordy Rose talking about the D-Wave computers and the weird hum, and like they're in these big boxes that are like kept at like absolute zero. And he's like, it feels like you're standing next to an altar to an alien god.
This is what they look like. There are 2 of them. These are from our lab in Burnaby in British Columbia. From the outside, they look like giant black monoliths, big metal boxes, about 10 feet on a side, 12 feet tall. And they are powered, they have a fridge inside them, a refrigerator that cools these chips to almost absolute zero. Just a wisp, a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. Hundreds of times colder than interstellar space. Amongst the coldest and most isolated and extreme conditions that humans have ever been able to engineer. These fridges, interestingly enough, which are called pulse tube dilution refrigerators, have a thing called a pulse tube, which emits a sound roughly once per second, which sounds eerily like a heartbeat. So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it is an awe-inspiring thing, at least for me. It feels like an altar to an alien god. They really are impressive machines.
And he's like, we've discovered that there are infinite parallel realities that are like practically exactly the same as this one. He's like, the only difference is the value of the qubit. And we can tap into there and farm their resources. Well, in the future. Like, yeah, you're already doing that. That's why we have the freaking Mandela effect.
But I'm going to give you a roundabout way of understanding this. Imagine that there really are parallel universes out there, and now imagine you have two that are exactly identical in every respect, all the way out to the horizon as far as we can see, down to the last little atomic detail of every single thing, with only one difference. And that's the value of a little thing called a qubit on this chip, which is a contraction of quantum bit. And that qubit is very much like a bit or a transistor in a conventional computer. It has two distinct physical states, which we call 0 and 1 for bit. In a conventional computer, these are mutually exclusive. That device is either one or the other, and never anything else. In a quantum computer, that device can be in this strange situation where these two parallel universes have a nexus, a point in space where they overlap. And when you increase the number of these devices, every time you add one of these qubits, you double the number of these parallel universes that you have access to, until such time when you get to a chip like this, which is about 500 of these bits, you have something like 2 to the 500th power of these guys living in that chip. So the way I think about it is that the shadows of these parallel worlds overlap with ours. And if we're smart enough, we can dive into them and grab their resources and pull them back into ours to make an effect in our world. Now, this may sound very odd to you and bizarre, and in fact, I am using language that a normal theoretical physicist probably wouldn't use, but this is, what I'm telling you is absolutely correct and in line with the way that these things actually work.
But he was saying with like a clear, definite authority of knowing that there were like infinite parallel realities of this one world. So that makes the quantum jumping thing that we've observed make more sense. It's like I said, we can't die. We have all these, like I've had it recently. We've talked about it on the channel. You have all these, especially closer to the end of the game, you have all these near misses. Like, oh my gosh, I almost died. And the one I had was with my daughter in the car, and like that car came right, that I could almost see out of the corner of my eye. It's like the front of that car should have been in my rib cage. But we rolled, a few more feet, and there was a bunch of honking and stuff. And my brain couldn't compute it. I'm like, what just happened? How did we not get hit? That doesn't make sense. And it was me. My daughter was driving. She had her friend in the car too. So I came in here and I'm like, okay, Mom, what the hell just happened? And I pull up my tarot deck. First thing I pulled was the 5 of Cups, which is a guy that's mourning. And 3 of the cups were tilted over with the red wine pouring out. And there was 3 of us in the car. I pulled another card and I got death. At the time, I interpreted that as like something was trying to kill me. But it's like I think we did get slammed and then we just quantum jumped. And I know a bunch of people have had similar things happen. It's very weird. Anyway, we'll wrap this up. Give you now you got some stuff to think about. If you want to get in touch with this, get any of our energy tools, I'm at the list that I'll do like a made-to-order liquid crystal core order out of chaos pendant, because it's definitely an interesting pendant. It's clumencreations.etsy.com. Chris and Lumen. See you next time.